In Australian wineries especially, like, oh, you're a younger female, you know what you'll be good at? Lab work. And so I got pigeonholed into lab work. And yeah, I was good at lab work. And the international vintages were the first ones where I could say, I don't want to do that. And I'd sent out resumes saying, I don't want to do lab work.
Dig out something.
I want to get dirty. I worked for Hogue Cellars in Washington State, and I was the white racking girl. Like, that's all I did for that vintage. It felt like I did white rackings. And I am quite good at white rackings.
Anita Goode is Wangolina through and through, the first member of her family who have been on the land of Wangolina Station for more than 100 years to branch out and make wine. Part of the Greater Limestone Coast region, Mount Benson is a unique coastal location about 300 kilometres from Adelaide, halfway between Kingston and Robe in the state's southeast. The moderate maritime climate provides the biggest drawcard from a viticultural point of view, and as Anita will tell you, it gets bloody windy. But all that cold air plays an essential role in helping Wangolina wines stand out from the crowd, much like their creator, who comes equipped with purple hair and an attitude you can see a mile away.
Welcome to Healthy Minds, Healthy Vines, the wellbeing podcast for growers, proudly brought to you by the Wine Grape Council of South Australia and sponsored by PIRSA. Hosted by award-winning mental health podcaster Callum McPherson and wine columnist for The Australian, Nick Ryan.
Anita, you're Mount Benson born and bred. Can you just give us a understanding of the place that you love so much?
So Mount Benson is the wine region that was sort of established in the late 90s. I'm a Wangolina girl, which is our family property. So my family have been on that farm there for 5 generations, in the area for 5 generations. And so we're about sort of 315 kilometres south of Adelaide, and probably I think it's 130 k's west of Coonawarra. So it's down near a town called Robe, and it's a really lovely spot, really windy, which makes us all a little bit bonkers.
You said it before I got in.
I've got to get my little bit in first, otherwise it's.
Give me a chance. Give me a chance.
And then, yeah, but it's a really sort of lovely coastal environment with sort of undulations. It's not hilly as such, but we're not as flat as Coonawarra, and yeah, it's a newish wine region. We established the region quite early in the piece, but yeah, it's still a new wine region with very sort of small amounts of plantings. I think we're sort of 500-600 hectares all up, so not very big, and mainly family companies involved in the region as well, which is really cool to see. So,
and the maritime conditions are helpful.
Yeah, definitely. It would always help.
Is this where you talk about your upwelling?
I love talking about an upwelling. Love talking about.
Come on,
an
let's hear about your upwelling, Anita.
So yeah, basically we are really poised right on the edge of what's called the Bonnie Upwelling. It's a really interesting, fascinating thing that happens where the warmer water from the surface of the ocean blows north, and so those cold Antarctic currents actually rise to the surface. And so from the point of Cape Jaffa, where Mount Benson sits, all the way around to Portland in Victoria, we get this patch of cold water, which brings with it a lot of nutrients for the crayfishing lobster industry, but also that cold water cools the wind, and those winds cool the vineyards. So we're copping the brunt of it in Mount Benson, but it does flow inland into sort of the inner parts of the Limestone Coast as well. So Coonawarra is heavily affected by it. And they're, 130 k's inland.
Yeah, it shows how significant it is.
Yeah,
if they're feeling it there.
They're feeling the cold too.
Must be really feeling it at Mount Benson.
Yeah, and I mean, we are known for wind where we are. Like, it is windy, and there's sort of joke that you're local when you find yourself standing in a paddock just screaming at the wind, which we've all done. But it's so impactful in terms of viticulture, because it does actually change, especially the way those vines establish early on, but then also in terms of ripeness and things, like we get beautiful acid retention. So in whites and reds, that, acid retention is really, really key, along with, aromatic build-up. So we have a really strong sort of diurnal fluctuation. It's a lot colder at night than it is during the day. And so we get this amazing capture of aromatic. And so for me personally, I really believe that Mount Benson is amazing for aromatic white grapes. and to the point where I've leaned into that really heavily. I've got Shiraz and Cabernet in the vineyard, but the rest of my vineyard is all different white grape varieties now. We pulled out a lot of our Cabernet, which is somewhat controversial for the Limestone Coast. But yeah, we're sort of, I think it's about 85% white grapes in the vineyard now, because that aromatic capture and that good acid retention really, really does help with white wine.
Well, there's got to be some upside to all the fucking wind all the time.
Is it stronger seasonally? I mean, are there windier parts of the year? Are there windier parts of the day as well?
Yeah, definitely. Like we have strong sea breezes in the afternoon, and that's why it cools down so quickly. There's definitely windier parts of the year, and the upwelling comes and goes. It's not a permanent thing. It as the winds change or the direction of the winds change, the way that the shape of the upwelling and also the temperature of it changes. So this year we had, it came in a little earlier. So it came in sort of just before Christmas. It usually comes around Christmas, but it was a bit earlier this year. And then it sort of calmed down a little bit. So water temperatures got a bit warmer for a couple of days or a week or so. And then sort of early January, it really came in strong and it stayed strong, which is really great. We love, like, this strong upwelling is good for us because it can slow down ripeness, which gives you, once again, better flavour. So, yeah, and on it was the 27th of December, I had a friend come down and I took the afternoon off of Celador, which is bizarre for me on the 27th of December because it's busy, busy, busy. And we went for a swim and the water was 12 degrees and I stayed in for about a minute.
Yeah, nice.
Oh, good for the vineyards, not great for people with beach houses in Robe.
But people still go swimming anyway. Like, they're just bonkers.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's some of the coldest water I've ever seen or felt.
It is.
It's more of an ice bath. Or ice baths are fashionable these days.
I think Beachport's worse.
Beachport's worse.
Beachport is worse.
Because they're even but that's all still the same thing. It's all still the Bonnie upwelling.
Yeah.
But where I live, so Mount Benson is, we're on the point. So Cape Jaffa Point. So Cape Jaffa Wines is named for the point of Cape Jaffa.
Hi, Des.
G'day, Des. Love you, Des. Yeah, so north of Cape Jaffa, the water is actually warmer. So if you ever come down our way and you want to go for a swim, just go north of the point.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Much
Keep
better.
that in mind.
Much, much better.
Your family's farmed that area for 100 years. What does it mean to you to carry on tradition?
We're not very good at tradition, though. We're not about, like, I'm really lucky, I guess, especially with my dad and the way my parents were. They never made us feel bound to the tradition, and this was all voluntary on my behalf, or perhaps slight insanity.
And you're doing it in your own way.
And I'm doing it in my own way. It's a really interesting thing, like, especially at the moment that we talk about when we have a welcome from, welcome in and you have your sort of acknowledgements of country. We talk about that connection to country that people felt prior to us. And I feel that connection to my country myself. So if I ever have to do that, acknowledgement of country, I try to make sure that it explains my connection. 100 years of farming one place it's a long time, especially for Australians. And, I grew up there. It's my backyard. It's where we did everything, like we didn't go to, we went to school and back every day, but we didn't, that was where we spent our weekends, and our school holidays and all of that was spent on the farm. We either, Dad used to pay us to open gates because all of us liked money. And he knew that he'd need to pay us to open gates to get us out on the farm, but we'd go and do sheep work and things with Dad. And, that's where you spend your childhood. And so it is a really strong connection, but also having that history built into it where you talk to, I talk to my dad, I talk to my grandma, my grandma's 102 and she still has the most incredible memories of different things. And so you talk to them and you get the history and the information. And it's handy in what we're doing now. Like at the moment we're in essentially a drought where we are at the moment. We've had 37 mils of rain this calendar year, which is nothing for us. And, there's real issues with feeding stock and there's just no feed. And then having the history behind us to know how those cycles look. And so you can look into it and say, we had this sort of happen in 2005, or this isn't, Dad's like, it's not as bad as 1967.
Yeah.
where this happened. And while there is climate change and there is shifts in the patterns still sort of do replay. So there is that little bit of, especially the knowledge of how to cope and what the next steps
that history, literally living memory.
Yeah, when I always think it's really interesting when generational farming families move into viticulture and how they look at a vineyard on land that they've already known so well. It's a completely different layering to viticulture than if you just come in, bought that land as a vineyard project somewhere. I mean, you look at it slightly differently, I reckon. I
think, we do. And you do, because, like I'll talk to Dad and he'll go, oh, well, that's the part of that paddock before we had the Shiraz in there where the lucerne really grew. And we know that the lucerne really grew there because the limestone cap was crumblier. So therefore the roots of the lucerne are getting to the water table. So that's why that's over vigorous. Oh, cool. Thanks, Dad.
Yeah, could have told me that before.
Great information. Yeah. But, like little things as well that have shaped the way our vineyard works too. Like, and it's a silly one. Dad built the rows. He did all the establishment. I was off gallivanting. He established the vineyard with rows big enough to fit a proper, the farm tractor that we had at the time, which is not a vineyard tractor. And so we have a lot wider rows. And those wider rows have actually been really critical, and especially for us who do focus really heavily on Sauvignon Blanc, we're getting sun in, and we're getting sun into that fruit. So we're burning off a lot of the greener characters because we're getting sun in, and we have an ability to manipulate it more because the Sauvignon Blanc grows really high. So one row will shade another, but our rows are just that bit wider that they're not shading the next row as much. And it makes it a lot easier when you're trying to teach your daughter who's pretty shit on a tractor to spray. So,
but does your dad say, he didn't know that, or does he try to claim credit for it?
No, he didn't know that. And he doesn't claim credit. He claims credit for it in that was great. I did that. That was my choice. But it was something we sort of realised later, sort of like, looking at why our Sauvignon Blanc looks the way it does versus our neighbours' Sauvignon Blancs and things like that, especially when Sauvignon Blanc is really, it's an important grape for our region. And
what were those early conversations like about establishing vineyard?
Yeah, and what motivated that?
I think, my sort of recollection of it was, Dad wanted to diversify, and coming out of the 90s wool crisis and all of that, where we were really heavily hit by that as a family. Beef cattle prices weren't great through the recession as well. And that they came out of that saying, you've got to diversify. So where did we go? Grapevines.
That was the golden ticket.
Yeah.
Was part of it that you were already interested?
I think Dad would have done it regardless. I was interested in wine, but also maybe slightly steered to it. But I got into winemaking because I saw a poster on my maths classroom wall that said careers for women winemaker. And that would have been 1995. And I went and did work experience in Coonawarra and just fell in love with the fact that the boys taught me how to swear, pretty much. So I did work experience at, it was Rouge Homme and Wins at the time, and just loved it, just absolutely loved it.
Did you fall in love with drinking wine first or making it?
I reckon making it. Yeah, like I'm not very good at sitting down. I'm not one of those people that does good couch time and couldn't ever imagine desk work. Like everyone's like, oh, go and, you're pretty clever. You should go and be a lawyer or go and be this. And I'm like, oh God, I can't imagine.
Be on your feet.
Well, can't imagine having to put on a skirt and a pair of heels. Like, oh, no. Face full of makeup every day is like the worst. Like, it's my worst nightmare.
You don't need it?
Don't need it. But like that, so I saw that poster. I went, well, that sounds like fun. And Dad had already banned all three of us from farming. Like, you're not doing farming. That's not for you. Because it was bloody hard. We'd come out of the wool crisis. There was no money in farming, and it wasn't a career that I think Dad could see what essentially were his three clever daughters going back and doing farming. And I've managed to sort of wheedle my way back into farming via viticulture. But we did, we still have farmland. I've got at least at the moment. But yeah, we ran beef cattle for a number of years.
Do you remember that being like a tough time for your dad before starting wine?
Yeah. Dad was Dad's a cool dude these days. Like Dad and I get along really well, but he worked so hard through those years. And, you know, we're all feisty individuals. We all possess a temper and it comes from Dad. And we remember those years where it was hard. And, you know, I remember Dad coming in after having to go out and shoot sheep. He wasn't in a great mood.
Yeah, and then you must think how tough that is for him, you know, on a generational farming property, but at the same time sort of trying to push his daughters, you know, for their own sake away from a bit. I mean, must really tear a man up inside.
Yeah, I think, you know, but interestingly, Dad over the years, we went to a bull sale in Wagga together, just outside of Wagga at one point, and there's his, you know, I've gone with him, we're looking at buying bulls when we were breeding shorthorn still, and this dude's come up to him, he's like, "Oh, John, what are you going to do? You haven't got any sons." He's just stood there and gone, "Have you met my daughter Anita?" You know, like,
how'd you feel about that?
I was really like, oh, look at my dad just ignoring the question entirely on the basis of that basis of gender. Yeah. Terrible question, but you know, those guys don't know any better, so you can't get mad about it. But he's just gone, "Have you met my daughter Anita?" And the guy went, "Oh, righto." And I mean, there was pressure for Dad to have boy children, and he didn't get them. Ha, lucky Dad. But yeah, I always say Dad is one of the original feminists. He always wanted the best for his girls. He gave us amazing educations, and really, really pushed us to be who we wanted to be and let us be who we wanted to be as well. I mean, yeah, would he have liked us to all be doctors and lawyers and accountants? Probably. And now he's busy because I keep him busy on the farm because I need him to help me out all the time.
Yeah. But which you got to think deep down is a good result for him.
I think so. We're very similar people. He'd be really, really bored as a retired person. So yeah, I'm grateful for the work he does to help me out. I call him the CFO because he's the chief forklift operator.
Nice.
So he comes in, especially now we've built the winery, like he comes in over vintage and drives a forklift and looks after the bits and pieces that I would otherwise forget. And I sort of joke around the place, like, especially with all my staff, like I'm generally chaotic. So it's really wonderful to have the calm people behind me just cleaning up, like, "Oh, Anita." But it works really well in the team situation because I recognise that I create a lot of mess. So yeah, but
we all have our strengths.
Everyone has their strengths, but yeah, Dad, he's been amazing to have on board and you know, like the history and what he knows of the land as well. Like, you know, we had quite a busy frost season last year. We were out and about most nights. There was a lot of frost events for us, and we know that when we have a frost event like last year that we're coming into drier patches of weather. So, because we get more frost when it's drier anyway. And so
you have to make some adjustments.
Yeah.
What are you doing for frost?
We have a fan, but it's quite an interesting thing. Like, so we have one frost fan. Does it cover our whole vineyard correctly? No. So we bought a tiny little portable thing that all it does is just collect a bit of cold air and shoots it up in the air, which if you're trying to protect a whole vineyard with it, probably wouldn't work. But because we've put it in a hollow and it's about watching the flows of air.
Yeah.
I've also got little temperature loggers in different places around the vineyard, so we can actually watch what the air is doing, which seems a little bit extreme. But when you're trying to make the best use of a resource like one fan to cover what we need to cover, would it be better to go and buy a new fan? Yes. Do I have that much money? No. So we use the information we can to make that work to the best we can. And this year we had a really interesting night where the winds changed on us. It's not that it's windy, but the direction of air movement changed on us, and we could see that happening through these little loggers, which meant that the warmer air that we'd been blowing with the fan had just blown back onto the fan, so it turned the fan off. But in 5 minutes' time, it was going to be 0 degree cold, wet air coming through. So I actually kicked the fan back into gear manually earlier, and I think we saved a lot of fruit that night.
Yeah, it's paid for itself then.
Yeah. Mount Benson being coastal, if you look at the numbers and you look at the theory behind it, we shouldn't see frost. But because our frosts come from inland. So when we're having a frost event, the air is moving east from the east, and it does catch you out. And it's that sort of history, knowing that full well as a farmer in the area, like this is how the frosts come, and this is when they come and how they work. So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, the wind giveth and the wind taketh away.
Oh yeah, and I mean, being coastal, we that time of year we don't have the strength of wind that we have in January and February, and through into winter. So we do have sort of what we call them the equinoctial gales, which is sort of around September. So up to sort of the September 2025, we'll have 40, 50, 60, 70 k/h winds, like mad wind. But after those gales calm down, then you end up into frost season. So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Never easy.
Never easy. Grape growing, super easy. Let's do it.
It's the doddle. Everyone should do it.
Everyone should do it, definitely.
So you first got interested when you were a teenager, and then you ended up studying at uni.
Yep.
And then gallivanting, you went and did various vintages actually overseas as well. What did you learn from those experiences?
How to drink. I don't know, how to find my own way in the world. A lot of it. Like I went to boarding school and then off to uni, and we, lived here. But once I finished uni, heading overseas and being away from everyone it's really life-changing to, be dumped in a situation. And, I my first job in the States, I was dumped in an apartment, like, here you go, we'll see you on Monday. And then five minutes later, a guy's arrived with another girl, like, yep, we'll see you both on Monday. She didn't speak English. So the two of us were just stuck in this new town. We didn't know anything, not being able to communicate with each other. And that changes the way you are. It teaches you a lot. But I learned a lot of different things. I'd always been sort of pigeonholed a bit before I left in terms of Australian wineries, especially, like, oh, you're a younger female, you know what you'll be good at? Lab work. And so I got pigeonholed into lab work. And yeah, I was good at lab work. And the international vintages were the first ones where I could say, I don't want to do that. And I'd sent out resumes saying, I don't want to do lab work.
Dig out some
I want to get dirty. I worked for Hogue Cellars in Washington State, and I was the white racking girl. Like, that's all I did for that vintage. It felt like I did white rackings. And I am quite good at white rackings. Yeah, still am.
Never forget.
20 years later, 30 years later, one of those. 20. It's 20. I'm kidding. No, it is actually 20.
Contender for young guns, so it's can only
No,
be 20.
it is actually 20. So, and then,
you went to France as well?
Yeah, that was an interesting one. Because, my French was okay. Wasn't great.
Really?
Yeah.
From school?
No, I learnt French at uni. I took French as an elective.
Right.
But I also went to Alliance Française classes on Saturday mornings, which is why I think I speak better French hungover and drunk than I do when I'm sober.
We all do.
We all do. But yeah, I specifically took myself to classes for that on weekends because I knew it would lead me there anyway. And my mother always pushed us all to learn a language, and we all learnt German through school. And then my two sisters went off and, my younger sister is very good with languages. And so, to continue learning French was important. And, but yeah, the vintage in France was really interesting. I worked with probably the most chauvinistic person I've ever met in my life.
You've met a few?
Oh, I've met a few, but this guy, he was ace. But still, like, you find your fun where you find your fun. So I still found fun in it. But yeah, he was interesting.
Did you come back a full French speaker after that?
Not full, no. But
can you remember any of it now?
Oh, I can swear in French. Yeah,
nailed.
Perfect. No, I still can speak French. I'm not very good at it if you put me on the spot, but I understand more than I can say. So yeah, we get this group of French tourists come through Celador fairly frequently, and they'll sit there and ask me all these sorts of questions, and I'll look at the translator and say, I understand what they're saying, I just need you to translate the answer. So, and wine it's such a topic that so much of our language in wine comes from French anyway that a lot of it's pretty easy to...
There's that common ground that you can start building something.
Mm.
You and I have been friends for quite a while now.
Quite a while.
And what I've always, admired about you is your ability to bring people in, and you're an incredibly personable person. Is that something you actually have to work at?
Yeah.
Or is that what comes naturally?
Oh, no, I'm a happy person. I know that. I'm a happy kind of person. But I need my downtime. When I first started, we started Wangolina when I was 21. And, I'd sort of put in my brain this persona where it was like wine girl. And so you'd go out and you'd be this person like bubbly, talking about your wine, trying to sell your wine, doing all that. And eventually that separation sort of between that and, the quiet person I was at home sort of came together a lot. I also, I'm having a laugh at the moment because I've decided I've moved into what I'm calling my pre-Karen era, which is if you ask for the opinion, it's all your own fault. Yeah. You will get the opinion.
But you're not offering it.
But I'm not just, out there yelling at people yet. Okay. I'm putting a yes on that.
Yeah, that is. You got
to have somewhere to go.
But I'm owning my pre-Karen era. I'm enjoying it. I feel like at the moment, I've done enough and I've learned enough to, if somebody wants an opinion, I'm more than prepared to give it to. That sort of over time, I've always been, pretty out there, happy person, but I do need my downtime. I will spend a couple of weeks at home when I'm not out and about, just me, my cat, my dahlias. I'm pretty happy with that. Yeah.
You also do a lot of lonely miles.
Oh, I love a drive.
Yeah. I mean, is that the time, decompression time?
Yep. Some days I will drive the 3.25 hours to Adelaide, no radio, no phone calls, just me and the quiet. And I mean, I feel like that is verging on psychopathic, but but it's needed sometimes. It really is. And sometimes that's the nicest thinking time I get.
It's only slightly less psychopathic than probably listening to this podcast over and over and over again. If that's what happens, then we'll really know you've tipped over.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely. But I can spend hours just in my own thoughts if I need to, because it's really good time to just sit. And I got pulled over for a speeding ticket last year because I just missed the 80 sign. The guy's like, "What are we doing?" And I'm like, "Nothing." He goes, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Were you on your phone or something?" I'm like, "No, in my head. I was just thinking." He goes, "What were you thinking about?" I'm like, "Work." He's like, "That's not very exciting." And I'm like, "No, it's not." But he gave me a warning and let me off, which was kind. So,
okay, nice. A win.
It was a win.
Does that ever go too far where you feel a bit isolated or a bit too in your own head? Or have you got good ways of getting out of that?
My mum is a really interesting person too. And she had a thing when we were growing up, and it was if you walked up to mum and you said, "I'm bored," she'd just look at you and say, "Well, only boring people get bored." Yeah. And only lonely people, if you're lonely, you can fix it, was the other one. Like, so if you're feeling alone, go and find someone and don't be alone. Like, it's that be proactive about your own well-being sort of thing. Like,
so what will you do?
I'm if I ever sort of get to a point, I know when I'm getting stir crazy at home, and I'll just take myself down the pub, go and find somewhere to I can go by myself. And the good thing about rural communities and small communities has always been that if you are feeling lonely, all you have to do is go to the pub or, find somewhere where someone will be. And especially on a Friday night in Robe, if you go to the front bar of the Caledonian, it's like bonus friends everywhere. I tend to pop down to the cocktail bar in Robe the Black Swan and sit there, have a cocktail, and someone will talk to me. Like, it's just the way of small communities. But if I'm really needing, I come to Adelaide and catch up with my family and I'm in trade a lot.
You've got a great network of, friends and,
Yeah, and here in Adelaide,
committed tasting groups and...
I don't do so much tasting groups, I think.
But you used to, didn't you? A bit more. I always used to thought you were quite organised with that kind of thing.
Yeah, I used to do a lot more organising in that sort of space because I had to. But now I don't have time, sadly. Like, the business has sort of eaten a bit of time recently, which is good. Like, it's good things that taking up time, but being remote, I always talk about Mount Benson it's remote. And that's mainly because they've really struggled to give us both phone and internet signal for quite a long time. But it is a remote community in terms of wine. Like there's the nearest place to go and hang out with other wine people is Coonawarra, and that's still an hour and a half's drive. And it's an overnight stay. So you can't just have a Friday night knock off.
And with all due respect, when Coonawarra is the big smoke, you're really, you're remote.
Yeah. So and that's great. Like I've got a couple of the girls over in Coonawarra that I hang out with, play Scrabble, drink, and be silly, and that's great fun. But yeah, most of the time I'll come to Adelaide for that, if I sort of get to that point at home, I'm like, right, been here too long, need to go.
Because you're the sole winemaker as well.
Yeah.
So is it frustrating not having someone to bounce stuff off, or is that the beauty of it?
Well, I have an MW wine consultant that so Kim Milne has been helping me as a mentor since 2008. And I mean, Kim, I have so much amazing respect for. I think he's heard me angry cry more than anyone has ever had to deal with. It's not pretty. And having him and having that, mentor to sort of help with, especially when things go wrong. When things are going right, everything's easy, everything's fine. But as soon as something does go wrong, especially like my personality, I'm overly self-critical, always have been. And if I'm like, I'll be like, I've fucked this, it's fucked, it's not coming back from this, it's all gone, like I have ruined everything.
Catastrophizing.
Yeah, love it.
And then that's a reflection of you to yourself as well. I'm hopeless.
Yeah, absolutely, all of that.
Yeah.
And I'll call Kim and sit down and he'll talk me through how, like, all right, what are the steps that have led us to this point, right? What are the steps that lead us out of this point? How do we look at this and say, this is what's happened, great, move on from that. Assigning blame doesn't help. Know the point, know that critical control point, which is so boring, but know that point, where did it go wrong so that you don't do it again? But then also, how do we dig ourselves out of this hole? Like, what's the next steps? What are the key steps to identifying where you need to go from here to fix it? Because everything is generally fixable as long as you don't get in your own head and put it down the drain.
And has Kim been there pretty much since the start?
Kim came on board in 2008. So we made our wines originally from 2001 to 2007 at Cape Jaffa Wines down the road. And we sort of we grew away from what we could do there, especially the Sauvignon Blanc for us has always been such a big deal. We needed somewhere where we could do what we needed to do in terms of chilling and, processing aromatic white wine. And at the point that we got to there, it just wasn't working for it. Like, they could manage their own things really well, but we were just getting to that point. So we moved. And at the time, everyone thought, oh, you'll move to Coonawarra. But we actually went, well, love them. They make red wine. And so we moved to the Adelaide Hills. So we took all the contract processing up to the Adelaide Hills, and we were put in touch with Bird and Hand, where we did our contract processing at the time, and they put us in touch with Kim. So we started working with Bird and Hand to do our contract processing and Kim in 2008. And we worked with them for 12 years until 2020 at the end of the pandemic, and then did a year with a contract through Peter Lesky at Revenir before then building our own winery and moving everything home. So we still make our Sauvignon Blanc off-site because I can't put that much tonnage through the winery that I built because I don't have that much power or money for a chiller. But having but also having that continuity of Kim's brain and together with mine, we know the path that we're taking together, and he's always got, it's very much about just tidying the edges, like look at your wine once you finish with it. What can you do better? Right, so next year we're going to have a look at this, and this is the plan we're going to do for next year. And it's very much about, and it's the boring parts of life, but they're the really critical parts of life. It's planning, it's documenting, and it's making sure that I type out pages on pages and pages of how I'm going to make wine, what I'm going to do with it. And it's amazing to have that plan, because not only if I'm feeling stressed or overly busy or don't really know what I'm doing, I can go back to it and go, oh, that's right, you wanted to do this. One of the really interesting, wasn't interesting, I had a friend of mine passed away in the middle of vintage last year, and I lost it that day. I just lost my ability to know what I was doing next. And I ended up going back to my plan, because on the plan, it had I'd actually already written down the certain volumes of things that I wanted to achieve. So I could go, okay, that's going here and this needs to go here.
So your brain's on paper instead.
Yeah. And it's, as a sole winemaker, I'm quite conscious of risk. And especially like Nick mentioned, I drove a lot for a long time. I was doing kilometres and kilometres backing up and down the Coorong, which everyone knows is full of kangaroos and deer. So that having that plan and having that document sitting there, if something happens, everyone knows what the job is. Everyone knows what the next step is. And this year I have this vintage, I had a folder that had, a piece of paper in it with the vintage plan into a checklist for every batch. So I knew that if I ended up doing something stupid because I'm klutzy, and I can injure myself really easily because I've done it many times, someone can walk in and just go, oh, look, here's her Shiraz page. The harvester's booked. That was all booked, right? And we're now at this point here, which is she's added yeast, she's added enzyme, she's done all of these things. And now all we have to do is plunge it and press it off. Or, that fruit came in yesterday afternoon and it's had this done to it, but not this. And what's been moved where, and everything.
And I suppose knowing that you've got your ducks in a row means that you can have that stability and know that if anything was to go wrong or you had to go somewhere or whatever, that it wouldn't all stop.
Yeah. And while a lot of people would use a computer system to do that, great, perfect. I can't then, if it's all on computer, my dad can't log into that computer and find out the information because he's not literate in that program. So it has to be done in such a way that anyone can walk in at that time and just go, oh, we know where she's at. And then they can start figuring stuff out. That's really important to me. But it does seem really like recipe driven. Yeah,
but in a way, is it almost that sort of, regimentation, having that structure there, does that actually give you the mental space to maybe think a little differently about the process?
I think it gives me more space to be creative. Especially, I'll come through and I'll look at redoing all my vintage planning and stuff in December. Be like, oh yeah, this year I made Fiano for the first time. And so everything that I sort of planned that I was going to do with it was always going to change when that fruit hit, because we didn't know what the fruit was going to look like, because it's the first Fiano in Limestone Coast. So, you've got to look at it as its own beast. And so the things that I thought I was going to do, and I went, yeah, that's what I thought I was going to do, but this is actually what I've done. And that's all written down so that when I come to planning next year, I'll be like, yeah, so that worked, that didn't, that worked, that didn't.
And not just trying to keep it in your head.
Yeah, because I have a terrible memory. Horrible. Absolutely horrible. It's not my skill set, remembering things. So
no, but there's a lot to be said for, putting the process on paper.
Yeah.
And that gives you space to think.
While it's, I think a lot of winemakers especially sort of criticize that recipe kind of feel, because it feels very corporate. But to have your recipe means that it's changeable, and but also if something does go wrong, that for that little bit of time, that's covered, and those wines won't look like they've been made by somebody else.
Yeah.
Especially when my brand is all me, and it always has been. So making sure that, my personality is captured in those wines, and that's how that sort of looks like. Because some winemakers, you see their personality is in their wines. Like I see, Frank Vanderloo is one of those people, like those Mount Major wines. You see Frank in those wines.
Yep.
It's that, very stable, very conscious, very driven, and the styles that he makes are Frank.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And I try to hope that my wines look like me without stupid hair.
How do you describe your own?
My own wines. I'd like to think that they're vibrant and respectful. So I want the wines to look like the varieties that they come from, especially now that we make as many different varieties as I do, because I've gone down that rabbit hole pretty hard. And it's a vortex, that one. You know, to take fruit and look at fruit and say this is how that should be expressed. That's the respectful part. I want to make sure that that's where that is. And I want them to look like happy versions of themselves. I want them to be joyful and something that when people drink it, they feel happy and confident in what they're drinking, and not intimidated or, you know, feel like it's not approachable for them.
What about opinionated?
No, they're definitely.
Are they in their pre-Karen era?
All the wines are in their pre-Karen era.
Yeah, some are maybe even tipping over into full Karen. But when you talk about when you say your brand is all you, and I mean it is. How do you get that balance of it's time in the vineyard, it's in the winery, it's on the road, it's pouring wine for people, it's making sales calls. I mean, there's a lot to juggle.
Yeah.
Like, how do you fit it all in?
Well, I don't have family. Like, I don't have kids.
Smart woman.
Well, that's a whole other conversation, though. But I mean, that was a choice that wasn't made for me, and that's fine. Like, so I'm an endometriosis girl, and that's been a part of my life for a long time. And I knew at 19 that I'd struggle to have kids. And then when I was sort of faced with the choice of, do you want to go down this? I never met a bloke that I could tolerate for long enough. And I went, I had a really good think about, do I do the single mum kids route? And I realized it really wasn't for me. But not having, and I mean, it's really interesting as a woman in the wine industry, because having kids in the wine industry it's bloody hard. And I have, I watch girls with their try and juggle families and getting pregnant at the right time so that you aren't overly pregnant during vintage or having a baby during, like, oh, Jesus, like what a disaster. And so hard to manage.
There's a bit of a breeding program about all that.
Oh, so is. And the pressure of that on a woman is amazingly tough. So I have so much respect for women who are doing it with kids. I thankfully don't have kids, and I like what I do, and I don't sit still for long. I don't get television signal in my house, so that's pretty handy.
What are you doing, Sandy? You're a reader?
No, I work.
No, when you're not working, though, there's going to be some hours of the day. Or is it just sleep?
No, I garden. I grow about 1,200 dahlia plants, because you should never do anything on small scale. You should just do everything at mad woman
of
level.
Extremes.
Yeah, so I garden a lot, but I'm like, it's the same as the driving. When I'm gardening, I have my phone on me, but I'm not. I might listen to a podcast, but it's usually me just sitting out in my garden, quiet time, talking to the cat.
Oh, you have to listen to this podcast series now.
But when you're out there, with your sales hat on, are people sort of really responding to the fact that any question they might have about Wangolina wines is, it's all in your head?
Yep.
Everything is you.
Yeah. And I think, for the longest time, it took me a long time to actually accept that that's how that had to be, because trade work is shit. Like, no winemaker likes doing it because it's crappy, but it's what you turn it into as well. And, and I was saying to someone the other day, it's such a weird thing that we do in the wine industry, is that, we fly our winemakers who, some winemakers are not people. We fly them into different cities. They get picked up at the airport by possibly a bloke they've never met. And then they're driven around for a whole day to other people they've never met. And then you put them back on a plane at the end of the day. And it's, as a 21, 22, 23-year-old girl, that's really weird to do. And it's very daunting to do. And so for a long time when I was a lot younger, I didn't like it and I didn't enjoy it. But for me now, like I signed a national distribution arrangement with a company called Saint Wine in February last year. And I pushed that because I met the people involved in that business and I liked them and I wanted to be involved with those people. And that's been a really interesting thing for me because I really enjoy my days out in trade now. I enjoy the company of my rep, and I enjoy the people they take me to. But that's also probably come from maturity.
Is that maybe a relationship that then gives you maybe a little more freedom? If you've got great distribution, you trust those people, maybe you don't have to be making every single one of those sales calls. Maybe those people can go and speak for you.
Which is great. And so I'm not doing as much, because I'd sold all my own wine in Adelaide for years, and that was what I did. Like, I'd come to Adelaide for a week, a month, and do my own trade. And it was disheartening, like you're out there schlepping around. And, I remember having a conversation with a guy in a bottle shop who booked an appointment with me on a Wednesday. And then I went in to see him, and that was his day off. And he'd purposely booked me an appointment on his day off. And then I think some customers of his came into my cellar door when I was working, and not being short of opinion, they said, "Oh, why don't you sell at this bottle shop?" And I said, "Well, I tried to, but he booked me appointments on his day off, and I found that disrespectful. So I won't go. I won't sell my wine through him." And then I got this rather apologetic phone call like a week later saying, "I'm really sorry. I didn't realize how you felt about that." And I'm like, "Well, because you don't care." And I mean, it was 6 hours out of my life to drive to Adelaide to have that appointment with him. And
yeah, you feel like a sucker.
Yeah, you feel like a real sucker. So I was like, well, you don't deserve my wine. But
it's nice to be in a position to do that.
Well, it is nice to be in a position to do that.
Even if you're not.
But I wasn't in a position to do it.
Yeah.
But it changed the conversation a lot. And then all of a sudden I probably was more in a position to do it than I thought I was. So
they stock your wine now?
They did for a long time. I don't think they do at the moment, but they've had ownership changes. So yeah.
Right. How do you go with delegating?
Shitful. Horrible at it. I suck at delegating, but I'm trying to get better at it. That's something I try really hard to work on. I've got some great people that work for me, and especially like Daniel, who works for me in Cellador, is incredible. He's such a happy person too. And so like I'll just be like, can you please? And he's like, sure, no dramas. And I've got a Georgia who works for me. She's actually based here in Adelaide. I think she actually tries to make me delegate, but I'm learning. I'm getting better at it. I did the example for this year. Georgia's been on maternity leave. It was really funny because I spoke to my label supplier. I'm like, hey, in this week, can you please call me and just tell me that I need to get my labels done? And he's like, sure, I'll help you do that. I'm like, you can change your this is Stu Purdy at MCC, great dude. Mm-hmm. You can change your business card to read Anita's personal assistant if you like. And he's like, oh, I don't think I'll be doing that. But he rang me and said, right, time to get your labels organised. And I said, and I'm really grateful for when people actually realise that that's all I needed was someone to say, don't forget. Because you're trying to, for me, we're bottling Sauvignon Blanc in the first week of May, which means I need to have labels done as soon as that, like we're looking at printing those labels sometimes before it's been harvested. And so having somebody going, hey, Anita, you need to sign these off now, does help. Yeah. Does help a lot.
Yeah, and it would be easy to forget things
totally
when there's so much going on.
Yeah, and when you're working 14, 15 hours a day through vintage and, you just solely, like vintage has been really, like having everything having a lot of the stuff in-house now and doing my own vintage for the first time in forever, it's amazing how much of a vortex that is. Like, and I, like, as an overly horribly chatty person, my whole vintage experience is me basically talking to Dad about where we need to drive the forklift next. Yeah. And otherwise it's all in my head and it's all very internal and me just thinking out my next steps and moving on, and I get really like forgetful on how to actually interact with the world.
And just being able to speak stuff out loud as well to kind of make sense of it, because otherwise it can turn into a bit of a whirlwind in.
Yeah.
How do you look after yourself during vintage? Do you just try and tough it out, or do you have strategies to?
I have strategies
to get yourself through,
especially now that we've built the winery. Like I know that I need to actually take care of myself. I have been really I get HelloFresh delivered, so I don't have to go to the supermarket, and I actually get vegetables, which is a good start.
Not a sponsor.
Not a sponsor yet. But like making sure that, and over vintage, I'll actually walk home and have lunch and sit down, which is something that I don't do in the off season. I'll work at lunch. I'll work at my desk and have lunch at my desk. But during vintage, I'll be like, no, you're walking home. You're having the sit down, and taking that half an hour, and I'll like seriously just scroll TikTok or Instagram. You know, like half an hour's worth of doom scrolling of absolute mind numbing nothing.
It's the one time that can actually be useful.
Yeah, and that's all I need it for. Is like I'm happy watching cat videos for half an hour. So,
oh yeah, who isn't?
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite happy with people thinking I'm a crazy cat person. It's part of my persona.
Just about to
How many cats have you got?
Just the one.
Oh well, you're not.
Yeah. Well, he's enough. Yeah. So I've also, like I'd sort of look at this and go, well, I did actually lose 7 kilos over vintage. So did I look after myself? Did I do it properly? But I think I did okay. Yeah. But you're going to lose that much weight when you're doing 25,000 steps a day. Like that's a walk into the nearest town. It's a long way.
That's hard going.
It's hard going.
You touched on it before, but obviously the buck stops with you. Is there a time that stands out where you've made the wrong call?
Yeah, heaps of them.
Yeah, which ones are your favourites?
Oh, so many. There's been some interesting things like, little things, like everything from when we, originally how we packaged our wines to who you employ, when you employ, did you employ, and it's always, people are the hardest decisions too, because they're not just something you can pass off to. So when you make a bad choice in employment, they're hard choices when you realise you've done it badly.
Yeah, and then particularly in sort of relatively remote regional places too. It's not like, there's a queue out the door of people, coming in for a position.
No. And I've been pretty lucky generally overall. Like it's always resolved itself, but not without angst. And, like there's been some definite times where you're like, yeah, that was a bad decision. But all you can do is look at it and go, well, that was the right decision that you made at that time. Like you sat down, you made a decision, and when you made it, it was the right decision. Hindsight's amazing. Like if we all could work off hindsight all the time, we'd be fucking set for life. So, you can't just go, well, that didn't, you look at it, that didn't work. But
with the information available at the time, you made the call you made.
I made the call I made, and you made the choice and you move on. Like,
yeah, there's no point beating yourself up.
No. I will admit I had a really shocking 2022. 2022 was not my year. And we were building the winery, and then like a series of things went wrong. I ended up with no staff. It was just me and my cellar door casuals, which is great. My cellar door casuals are amazing, but they're not able to help me in any other way apart from cellar door serving people. And I've never worked as hard as I did then. And then coming out of that vintage, I had surgery on my hand. I got COVID. My previous cat died. And then something else happened. And then I called it and I said, I can't do this anymore. And I seriously pulled the pin and walked away. I went for a holiday, and I don't take holidays because I don't have time, but I can't do this. And said to a friend of mine, like, I think I've lost my resilience. Like if something else goes wrong now, I'm stuffed. And
well, there's a limit for everyone.
And I'd pushed that limit way too far. And I recognised that, and I was lucky that I sort of said to myself, like, I'm done now. I can't do any more. I got a counsellor I think I had that counsellor for a couple of months. That poor woman, I just cried. The first 3 sessions with her was just pure tears.
Yeah, there's some notebooks to go through.
Oh, and I mean, I still don't know how she understood anything I said. I think it was seriously just blubbing. And, but, you pull yourself back in together
But if you feel like that battery's charged up again?
My resilience battery's pretty good right now, I think. Like, the pandemic took a lot out of everybody, and I think for me that my tipping point was at the end of 22. And, it seems the decision fatigue that started in March of 2020, when we all just had to make whatever decision we could to keep our businesses afloat, that went for years. That wasn't, just 3 months of trying to pivot. it was decision after decision after decision on how we're going to do this, how we're going to make this look. You know, do we continue pushing on making the volumes of wine that we've got? Is the market going to, you know, and everything in that over those few years.
All that uncertainty weighs you down, doesn't it?
Yeah, and not knowing, you know, if you know, like, just little things like we had a wedding booked at Celador, and are we gonna get that wedding up? We didn't know that wedding was actually going to go ahead until 5 days before the wedding. So you're putting in all that work anyway. But, you know, trying to figure out how many staff you're going to have on when you have absolutely no idea how many people are going to show up to your Celador, let alone, you know, what comes next, and whether, you know, and now through into where we're at economically at the moment, knowing, do I, you know, trying to make those decisions of, I've got new routes to market. Am I, you know, I'm making more wine than I have ever made, where we've doubled production in the last 5-6 years. You know, like, is that a good idea? Who knows? We'll find out next year or the year after or the year after that. And funding that is difficult. Like, looking at your bank balance diminish rapidly, and, you know, even the decisions of who you're going to pay when the money comes in. Because when you finally get when you get your payment from your distributor and you've got all these bills, how you allocate that money and who gets it so that they can stop knocking at your door. Like, all of that takes
so many decisions to make.
Mm. So it's a really interesting time in the wine industry now. And while there is a lot of doom and gloom out there, and it's rightly so, and I think a lot of people, if you weren't thinking about exiting, I think exiting at this point would probably be, for a lot of people, the best thing I could do for themselves. And it's hard to make those decisions. Like, I've thought about it before. Like, you know, Wangolina's we'd sort of joke about it's a 20-year overnight success. You know, like, there were years there where we hadn't turned a profit in that business for 10 years, and it wasn't a profitable business. And looking at it going, do I continue to do this? Do I keep my staff? Do I keep my business? And how do I go about being the girl in town who had a wine brand that people really liked, and then she shut it down, and having to walk down the street when you've taken everybody's favourite Friday night drink away from them? Like,
your identity.
How do you do that? And that's my identity. I'd have to leave, and I'd have to go live in a city, and that would shit me. Like, that sucks.
So why didn't you quit?
Oh, because I'm annoying to myself.
And to others.
And to others. I think because I'm stubborn, basically, and I can't see another future for myself. So I had to make it happen for me, and no one else was going to do it for me. So, yeah.
I guess you got to go off that gut feeling, though, don't you?
Yeah, or just be belligerent. And I think, belligerence definitely came into it a lot. Like, I'm just going to keep going. And I think, you know, it pays off. It does.
You've doubled production.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like, my production and what we're making now is a very different beast to what it was pre-2018. You know, we put out our first Gruner Veltliner in 2018, and it changed everything. Everything is different now. I make too many wines, and I'm quite happy in the idiotic decisions I make every vintage to add more varieties into my mix.
Or you've got an addiction.
Oh, I'm totally addicted. Yeah. Pokemon, great varieties, dahlias. Have one, have them all.
Is there an end point? Is there a point where you go, that's enough?
I'm at a bit of a point now, because I can't plant anything more at the moment, because I don't have any money to do that, and I need a new frost fan if I'm going to do it. But the issue that I have is I'm also really shit at saying no. So the guys that are in the Limestone Coast who are
anything that's got anything alternative.
Anything
Let's ring Anita.
We'll just call Anita, because she won't say it. So I made my first Aglianico this year, and my first Fiano. Because, you know, they're like, Aglianico is definitely a variety for the Limestone Coast, but it actually looks really good.
But there's an excitement in that you just have to keep doing.
Yeah, and it's for someone who's been in their business for 20 years, it's that constant challenge of keeping myself excited too. It's while I love Sauvignon Blanc, it's one of the best grape varieties ever, Nick.
Yes, and
it really is.
No,
we should all drink more Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah, as long as we're not drinking Gris, sure.
Like I do make good Sauvignon Blanc. I've got that challenge covered.
No, you do.
So now it's time to find another challenge to keep my slightly ADHD brain satisfied, I think.
Where's the most satisfaction variety-wise? Is there something that really, just makes you warm inside?
You'll laugh at this. I find the Moscato really, really satisfying because it's the first in the winery, it's the first out the winery, it's made, it's finished, it's done, and it's delicious.
It's paid its own way.
And it's paid its own way. I find that really satisfying. But
and it's very good Moscato.
And it's great Moscato.
Look at that. I'm going on the record saying it's very good Moscato.
I'm just gonna shorten that little bit of the podcast and put it on my phone as a ringtone.
Yeah, you can have that.
But then I think the Gruner Veltliner is probably one of the biggest. Every year, the satisfaction of that wine will be hard to top because we took such a risk with it. Like we were one of the first plantings outside of the Adelaide Hills in South Australia, and I remember having a conversation with someone at the time that said, "What are you going to do with that? You're never going to be able to sell it. Like, I can't see that that's a good idea." And then my answer to that was, well, it's not Semillon, so it's a better option, which is still true. So, because we grafted our Semillon to Gruner, and the style that we make and the way that wine is made, every year it improves, and every year it's such a lovely wine, and it's such a dynamic wine. So I find that terribly satisfying.
With all these creations, are you proving others wrong or are you proving yourself right? Like, how are you approaching that?
That's a very good question.
Yeah.
It's both. I love being right. And I really love a bit of an I told you so. We all do. We shouldn't. Everyone loves it. It's brilliant. But I think for me, the real satisfaction of it is I knew I could do this. I knew this was right. But there are some things that, sort of coming out of the vineyard. We've got 4 new varieties coming online pretty shortly. Whether or not Garganega will be, the next top white variety of Limestone Coast I'm still dubious about, because I don't think it'll probably work. But I've got vines of it and I'm going to try really hard to make it work. But if it doesn't, I haven't lost anything.
Well, you've got to take shots to make shots.
Totally.
And it doesn't all work.
Totally.
But when it does, then it's great.
I'm all for, I will always say I'm a risk adverse person. Like, I'm not a big risk taker, but you're looking at what I've been doing, you think, she loves that. But it's always calculated risk. It's always something I've thought, like, there's not much I'm just going to do this and see how it goes.
Yeah, you're not betting the house on it.
No, because I like my house. It's where my cat lives.
Yeah, and the dahlias.
So looking to the future, what are your hopes for Wangolina?
I'm sort of at a point where, we've never exported. We don't export. So I'm hoping to get into the export market, mainly so I can have business-funded holidays overseas. That sounds great to me.
Yeah.
Not really. But I'm sort of, I want to get to a point where we're sustainably making enough wine to be a profitable business that gives me an income that is livable, and I can go and have some fun. I'd like to take a holiday sometime in the next 3 years. That'd be awesome.
How do you go on holiday? Are you just thinking about work the whole time? Like, that time you went on the holiday, was your mental state just totally
I was so ruined
work?
then that I turned everything off.
Yeah, okay.
Social media, everything. And I didn't look at my phone for anything but urgent emails for 8 days.
Did that help?
Yeah.
At that time?
Yeah. But then, you turn social media back on and then you see something you don't like and then all of a sudden you're really angry.
Yeah, you're straight back in.
Straight back in.
Yeah.
But
you have to be good at delegating if you go on a holiday, though.
Totally. Yeah. And at that point in time, we managed fine. Like, it wasn't an issue. It was September. It was pretty quiet. I previously, I'd had a couple of girls who had worked for me for a long time. I had an employee work with me for 11 years. I don't know how she did it. but super cool person. So that back when sort of I had that more continuity in my staff, it was different. I took my holidays. Now we're sort of getting into that pattern again, which is great. But yeah, I want to build a business that sustainably provides a good income for the people I've got on board, that I've made them sign their contracts in blood, so they're never leaving.
Well, that's key.
That is key, yeah.
If you're listening, make sure you get it in blood.
Yeah.
No, but also I think one of the key things, and that is listening to what my colleagues are saying they want out of their job, and making that work. I work flexibly. I don't expect anyone to not work flexibly. I don't need you in the office from 9 to 5. If you don't need to be in the office from 9 to 5, I don't need to see your face there. If you're happy working from home for a day a week, do that. Like, I don't care, as long as we're all getting what we need to get done. But just, yeah, getting to a point where we can all sort of look at it and be really proud of what we've done and enjoy it. And I've got, I'm 44 now. And I was sort of
still a young gun.
Still a young gun. Just.
Yeah.
Just. But, looking at my endpoint and trying to figure out what my endpoint in the business looks like, because I know I'm conscious of the fact that when you are the brand and the brand is you, that means that when you don't work for the brand anymore, what's left? And not having kids, my sisters don't have kids, there's no succession really on this. Like, we did our succession planning from Dad's generation to ours, and now mine is
sidetracked.
Yeah, and now mine is sort of like, what do I want to do with it, and how do I move into retirement, which seems really weird to think about at 44, but I've been thinking about it since I was 30, because you need to think about it for that long. And I don't plan to retire. I think I'd be annoying.
Have you got any thoughts on what you might do?
Probably grow more dahlias.
Yes. A couple more cats.
But probably look at creating Wangolina into a place where, I'd have less physical responsibility and less mental responsibility as the years go on. And how that looks, is still, something that we have to formulate and get right.
Yeah, and there's no cap on experimenting, even if you're not doing all the groundwork.
No, there's definitely not. And, we've got a bit happening in the next few years in terms of things that we're, bringing online and bits and pieces. And then, and I do plan to sort of consolidate at some point, mainly because we're running out of shelves in Celador and spaces to store things and space in the book at the end of the portfolio for the distributor.
Yeah, you can have too much.
You can have too much. But, we do need an Australian melon de Begonia, so, that's happening.
And if anyone's going to do it, Anita,
it's going to be me.
Be you. And that's the thing. That's, look out those export markets. If anyone's going to be out there telling people around the world where Mount Benson is and why it's special, then no one better to do it than you.
Thanks, Nick.
I noticed you said that you want to build something you can be proud of. Surely you already have. Hearing your whole history and everything you've already done.
I am proud of what I've done, but and I'm proud of what my family's achieved. We've farmed a piece of land for 100 years, and it's an amazing place, and the connections and the community and the people that surround that sort of long-term life that we've had, like the trucking companies and the people that we've worked with for 100 years, we're still all connected, and that is something to be really proud of. Like, we haven't pissed each other off enough, or that those families have worked together for so long that it's second nature to us. And then looking at that, and then looking at how you adapt that into the wine game and moving that forward and keeping those connections the same, that's something I'm incredibly proud of. I'm proud of the fact that I'm proud of the fact of what we've built, and I'm proud of what we produce. The wines are great. While uber critical Anita still goes, they're not going to be fixed. The wine is good. It's approachable and it's fun, and I'm proud of and at the end of every day when I leave the office, I don't walk out of the office thinking, oh, I've had a bad day. It's not good for you anyway. Like I always try and finish off the day by like finishing something. And then I'm like, yep, finish something today. Good. Yeah, it's kind of, but it's a long-term thing too. Like it's something that will, you know, as I grow as a person, it grows with me too. So what I'm really proud of now might not be what I'm really proud of in 10 years' time, but I'll still be proud of today. But what it looks like.
Still be proud of Moscato.
I will always be proud of Moscato.
That's it. It's a T-shirt, right?
No.
And wine gets better with age, right?
Not Moscato.
Actually, I have got older Moscatos I'm going to show you because they actually taste pretty good. Yes, good. They taste good.
All right.
It's cool. Yeah, it's interesting.
Sure. Can't wait.
There you go.
I'll clear my diary.
I'm leading a one-woman charge to
Moscato vertical.
Yeah. No, we'll do it. I'll tell you, it's quite entertaining.
If anyone can pull it off, Anita, that's you.
I think the way the eyes light up, that's not going to go anywhere.
No. But yeah, like it's exciting to think, you know, in 4 years' time, we'll probably be looking at our, you know, 10-year vertical of Gruner Veltliner. That's exciting stuff. You know, we're 5 vintages in now, 6 vintages in tank, about to get bottled. Looking at the way that, you know, it sounds really, anyone can have a look at a vertical of Cabernet for 20 years, but there's not going to be too many that'll be like, oh, let's have a look at our vertical of Lagrange. You know, that's exciting to me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we should do that too.
Yeah. No,
you just have to get through the Moscato
before or after the Lagrange.
Well, I mean, I'd probably do it after.
Yeah. Cleanse. Wash the tannin out.
But yeah, it's an interesting space to play in the alt guard, like in those alt varieties, and I think the wine industry in 20 years will be a different place to it was when I first started 20 years ago too, and it is
absolutely.
Like
yeah, it already is.
It already is. So
well, stay in the game and see what happens.
Oh, let's hope. It's tough out there at the moment though. So, but we'll be right.
Thanks, Anita.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks for listening. Head to the Wine Grape Council of South Australia website for links and further resources. This is part of a bigger conversation, so feel free to share this podcast with your mates and look after yourselves. Cheers.